Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Intentional Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Campion, and I am delighted to host this conversation today with John Wilson. John is the club ambassador for the Charleston Battery, a professional soccer club based in Charleston, South Carolina. John's story is a fascinating one. He grew up in a small town in South Carolina and almost accidentally found his way into the game of soccer. It was not a very common sport played in his community, the Black community in small town South Carolina at that time. This is back in the kind of mid 80s, early 90s. So some fascinating stories from John about that time. He went on to do some really amazing things, including playing for the number one college team in the country at the time, Clemson University, where he won an ACC championship, and later getting drafted to the MLS, Major League Soccer, where he played for multiple teams and won an MLS Cup, before finding his way back to South Carolina, where he's become a staple in the community, specifically with the soccer club, the Charleston Battery, for many years now. So in this conversation, John and I cover everything from his background to his views on youth sports to lessons that he's learned over the years dealing with things like injury and failure and even an identity crisis. So much good stuff here. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Before we get going, just a quick reminder that if you like this podcast, you will love the Intentional Wisdom newsletter. It's one email every other week. I recap all of the lessons that I'm learning from all of my amazing guests, just like John. And I tell you about everything I'm trying myself too, from fitness routines to new habits that I'm trying to cultivate. And I also share all of the best books, the articles, the podcasts, the videos, everything that I'm consuming, I share with you in case you want to use it in your own content diet. So if that sounds interesting, you can join the community for free at gregcampion.substack.com. With that, please enjoy this conversation with John Wilson. All right, John Wilson, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm psyched to have you here. This is awesome. I was looking back at my roster of prior guests, and I was trying to think, have I had any professional athletes on the podcast before, or anybody who's played professional sports? And I think the answer is no. I've had some Peloton instructors, I've had D1 baseball players, some, fitness instructors, authors, but no one who's played professional sports. So you are a trailblazer, the first professional athlete to come on Intentional Wisdom. So
that's great. I'm always for being a trailblazer, and it's awesome to be on this podcast today and really just having a conversation about really what I, as a kid, as a adolescent, teenager, as an adult, as a pro, what allowed me to be successful. And it's just good to have a conversation about it and be able to share some insights and also learn from you.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So of course you played professional soccer at different levels, and we'll get into that, including MLS and for many years on the Charleston Battery, which I want to hear about. And I know you're still affiliated with that team, so it'd be cool to talk about that. And I know you've won championships along the way, including an ACC championship with Clemson, which must have been amazing. But let's kind of like rewind the clock back to the beginning, if you're okay with that. I believe it all started for you back in a small town in South Carolina. So take me back to sort of the John Wilson origin story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, a small town in South Carolina called Seneca. It is the next town over from Clemson. Hence, why earlier I kind of chuckled, and you mentioned Clemson because I ended up going to school there. Yeah. But I grew up about literally 10 miles from the university. I grew up in a place where at the time soccer wasn't big at the youth level. For me, I grew up in an environment where you usually played baseball, football. Soccer was looked at, even from my own community, as something you didn't do as a Black kid growing up there. Mm-hmm. And even as a player there, just growing up there, you even had those that didn't know the game who would describe it as a communist sport.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Communist sport. I haven't heard that one before.
yeah, it was at a time when the game was still young. But the ironic part about growing up there, just down the street, was Clemson University, who had one of the top programs in the country. And I found the game through my best friend, Andy Mace. It just so happened that I hopped on a school bus after practice one day. I was supposed to go over there to play. I walked in the door and his mom, Nita, kind of looked at me with a puzzled look. And she said, "Did your mom tell you that you were supposed to go home today?" And I said, "No." And so she called my mom and asked if I could come along to soccer practice. I went along and stood and watched, and the coach asked me if I wanted to play. And I nervously said yes. And for me, that's when it started to change. Literally the sport changed the course of my life. From becoming the first in my family to go to college, to then becoming a professional player. And that's how it started. It was, I don't want to say it was just by chance. I think I had to do some things, and my parents had to allow me to be in different environments and meet different people to be able to pursue that dream of playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was fortuitous that you got on that bus or made that mistake, I guess, that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And me and Andy had just moved from Slidell, Louisiana. His parents moved to Seneca for a job, and we became best friends, and that opened up the door to a game that literally is played all around the world, but was still so new to me.
Yeah, that's cool. So Seneca, South Carolina, but I think you and I are right about the same age. So we're talking about, this must have been mid 80s sort of time frame when you got introduced to the game. I think about, small town South Carolina. I mean, I live in North Carolina, and now I live in the Charlotte area, and it's this like becoming this like, cosmopolitan city with all kinds of northern transplants like me. But I kind of think about like what small town Seneca, South Carolina was like in the late 70s, 80s, even into the early 90s. Like, and I wonder, like, growing up as a Black kid there, like, I wonder, like, did you encounter a lot of racism, like whether on the field or off the field?
That's a very good question. And I did, but I also need to preface my childhood was also, my dad was a minister and a pastor, and I grew up in a very strict, I'll call it religion, where even they said sports weren't of God. It was really about this, in a way, controlling what you did. And not only to have that type of religion or mindset bearing down on me as a young kid, but then you add that small town mindset of, this is what you do when you're a Black kid in Seneca. If you don't go to school, you go work in the mill. And I did face racism. It was interesting because earlier I mentioned about individuals really wondering why was I playing soccer, and I used the word community because I'm part of a lot of communities. The Black community, they called it. They would ask, "Hey, why are you playing the white man's sport?" When in reality, in Africa, all over the world, this sport was being played by everyone from different races and backgrounds. So I had to deal with that. And yes, and then the other side was, okay, here's this Black kid that's playing soccer. And on my first team, I was blessed to have, there was 3 other Black players, but we stood out. And I'll never forget when, in between teams, meaning 2 of those players left, and it was just me. So I would travel with the team, and there would be some racial slurs thrown out there, but I always had what I call these agents of change that were able to help me handle those and to keep me, not only motivated, but to understand that when you're able to connect your gift with a purpose and to maximize it, it may be different than what everybody else is used to. But when you're able to do that, it creates this, what I describe, this urge to not only dream, but to accomplish those dreams. It sounds, when I talk about soccer now and how I started playing, to some people, they're like, like saying yes to playing soccer was a big thing. It was back then. And I really stress to, especially younger individuals, about if you find something that you're passionate about that may be different, but is positive than maybe what your environment or family thinks, go for it. Because I believe we're all shaped to do unique things. Because if we all do the same thing, then we're just robots.
It's boring, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
boring. And then there's no innovation.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I talk about it a lot now when I speak, this childlike mindset I had, an approach to maximizing the gifts that I've been blessed with.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were, okay. So, thank you for painting that picture. I think it's easy for folks to forget it because, the game has just come such a long way, through the course of our lifetimes. And I mean, it's incredible. I sit here in Charlotte and we've got this new MLS team that is all the rage, and it is like, really taken over in terms of like spectator sports here. People are crazy about it, but it's obviously, the most popular game in the world, but really in the US is, the last, however many years, 20 years or what have you, just really taken off. So I feel like it's easy for people to forget, put themselves in your shoes in Seneca, South Carolina, back in the 80s, how that would have been a kind of a different choice to make, one that raised a lot of eyebrows, especially in the communities that you were in. And so it took a little bit of bravery or gumption or whatever you want to call it to say, I actually like this. And, I actually want to pursue this. Now, did you, from the get-go, were you like naturally skilled at it? Did you start selling like right away?
Oh, I was amazing. No, I was horrible. When I first started, that first day that I was out there and I said yes, I had on a pair of high top Larry Bird black and white Converse.
Yeah, I remember those.
You remember those? Yeah.
Those were like the precursors to the ones D Brown was wearing.
D Brown, one that had the pump on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah. And I had a pair of black jogging pants and a white t-shirt. And I was horrible. I was always a decent athlete, but being a decent athlete and soccer is not enough. But I had a coach named Tony Stevens, English gentleman, who he saw something in me. And he always said that even though I was cagey, because I was very shy, introvert, I stuttered. He said that whenever he would talk and show a drill, my eyes would stay on him. And when I started going to practice, when I started being able to see what the game could allow me to experience, like for me, even going to a different city was a big deal. Even going to certain restaurants was a big deal. And the game just, it was so new, and I could be creative. So then I would just pick up and take in whatever he gave me. He would send me home with VHS tapes. I'd take him over to my uncle's house, who lived over in the projects, because he had a VCR, and I'd watch him. And I would then go out and try to mimic what I saw. I was very good. I wish I was. It's amazing how, as we get older and there are more things vying for our attention, I was so good at listening and remembering what he said or who said it, and then visualizing it, like what I saw with my eyes, take it in and go home and just replay it. And the coach just fostered that. he never put me in this. He never said you had to do this or had to do that. And that's how I progressed. I spent a lot of time on my own training. That's how I got better. I didn't have a personal trainer, but when I first started, I was awful. Like my best friend, Andy, his dad said, John, I remember when your first official practice, you had on soccer cleats and jeans.
The jeans are always the giveaway, man.
Right. But as a kid, I didn't think anything of it. It was something new, and I can't put into words what I felt when I started playing. I just knew that this was something that was meant for me, and that was a driving force. So,
yeah. Well, I know you. I think you talk maybe in some of the speeches that you give around pursuing these areas, whether they're areas of natural gifts or areas that you're, places where you just really find joy. I mean, to me, it sounds like, listening to what you just described, like this just became a real area of curiosity, and I don't know if passion's the right word, but it's almost like something that you became obsessed with. And I think that, I always think about like, how do you get really good at something, right? In my view, it's like, if you want to be the best in the world at something, or really excel at something, it almost has to be something that feels like play to you and feels like work to everybody else. I mean, was that the kind of way you felt about soccer at that point?
I love the way you describe that. Yeah. And that's why some people cannot understand why I believe high achievers, they can spend time doing something over and over by themselves.
Mm.
That's how I felt. It was this joy. Like even when I was doing some type of fitness, or even when I was doing something that to others is like, man, that's so tough. I knew it was tough, but I knew what it was going to get me as well. If that external motivation of being able to know that, okay, if I do this, I'm going to be able to enjoy the game more. That's how I looked at the getting better technically.
Mm-hmm.
And as I speak to athletes and different individuals, I don't believe there's really secrets to how to maximize your gifts. I think first you have to know your gifts, match them up with the right vocation, career. But then from there, it's about the repetition, creativity, the optimism. And then you develop these habits and you do them over and over again. I kind of have a sense now that there are some who they're looking for this magic pill. They see the highlights, but they don't see maybe what the successful businessman or woman has done. And it's not so different. Like when people ask me, so what did you do to become this player you became? And I used to try to think of something that was just so different, but always came back to, well, I learned about which I call educate.
Mm-hmm.
I was self-motivated, which allowed me then to train, to work on it, to put it into practice. And then I just repeated that. And I do believe, obviously, the knowledge that you take in, you want it to be the correct knowledge in regards to whatever vocation or whatever you're pursuing. But I believe that's how you can maximize what you have.
Yeah. I want to come back to that kind of framework, if you will, that you just described, this kind of educate, motivate, and train. But let me ask you just really quickly, you mentioned as a kid, you stuttered. Was that a big issue as a kid?
Yeah, it was, issue in regards to how it made me feel. So I mentioned earlier that the coach said I was cagey. It was because I grew up in a very sheltered lifestyle where you looked at certain things and certain people as not of God.
Mm-hmm.
And by my soccer opened up this whole new world that I never knew about. And when you have a stutter, when you get excited, when you get nervous, and then I was in a totally different environment. A lot of times I was the only Black kid with these great families who were supporting me.
Mm.
And I realized that to basically sort out this stutter that I had to get to know myself. I had to have confidence, and I had to relax, almost as they say in yoga, work on your breathing, your awareness of breath. And I had to face some fears, but it was a big deal. It caused me to pull back. But I was always still listening. I may not have said much, but I was always still listening.
I've seen like an uncanny amount of successful people have little things that could be considered like weaknesses or challenges as kids. And they ultimately somehow end up turning them around into strengths or superpowers or what have you. Like, it's pretty shocking to me. Like, I've studied a lot of, CEOs and entrepreneurs, and like the percentage that either stuttered or dyslexic or something that is like, as a kid, is just like, you think it's probably, I think about my own kids now, and I think like the stuff that they are self-conscious about just like can take over their whole world, because it's just such a big deal to them at the
Yeah.
time. So, yeah, I mean, do you think that in some weird way that ultimately like became a strength for you somehow?
It became a strength, because even the way I talk now, or I should say speak, that was developed over time of being able to manage my emotions, my
Mm.
breathing, and my excitement.
Hmm.
I didn't know that I was ever going to be on a stage speaking in front of, hundreds of thousands of people. But I feel like by me being able to manage and really learn about, John, this is what's causing your stutter. I believe also that, and I find this in athletes, even in myself, if you want to succeed in something, you're going to start to figure out and dig in, okay, what do I need to do to be successful at that? What are those things that maybe aren't the best? Or what are those triggers that maybe cause me in the soccer world to turn over the ball, or to not basically move my teammate in a direction? As I got older, I started to figure that out. I never went to a doctor that I can remember. It was more this innate drive to, okay, John, if you're going to play soccer and you want to be successful, you have to face some fears. And one of your fears is that you're going to stutter whenever you talk. And as a kid, I just worked at it. And then it's amazing when you work at something. And I think you mentioned it earlier about how to do with failures. I think sometimes we don't want to fail, but that failure, you keep failing, you start figuring out insights that allow you to be successful.
Mhm.
And it's just like me trying to learn how to pass the ball with my right foot. I'm left-footed, dominant.
Mm.
It's the same, my right foot just for standing, but technique, like once again, there's no secrets, if you want to get better at something. And the stutter was something I had to work at.
Yeah.
There were some embarrassing moments, but as a kid, it was just, I would get back up, speak again. And yeah. And I think that was instilled in me from my parents as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those are some pretty important lessons to learn as a kid. So I'm not surprised to see you go on to do some pretty cool and impressive things in your life, learning some of those lessons at an early age. So clearly, you made some progress from the kid who showed up in jeans at this first official practice. So tell me about that, that progress in finding yourself at Clemson and ultimately planned for an ACC championship. Tell me about what that was like.
It was a dream come true, and like all dreams are easy, right? It was- I think sometimes, we, if truth be told, like yourself and other people who are successful, there are probably more failures, more times where you dream, and between the first dream and getting to the dream, it's like a roller coaster.
Right.
I saw the 1987 national championship team play at Clemson, and they won it that year. And I said, you know what? I want to play there. Now, I knew nothing about college, really. I knew nothing about college recruiting, but that was my dream. And the way for me to reach that dream was, okay, I'm just going to be the best soccer player that I can be. I wasn't worried about anything else. Fast forward to high school, I was starting to be recruited. Clemson was not recruiting me. Just down the street, Clemson was not recruiting. They did not recruit from South Carolina.
Really?
I think I'm still doing research in regards to this for my book. I think I may be the first native-born South Carolinian to play there. I know since 1966.
No kidding.
But it may go further back than that.
Yeah.
And
is it just that the game was not like developed enough in the state for them to be recruiting locally, or?
No, the legendary coach Dr. Ibrahim was recruiting from all over the world.
I see.
Nigeria, all over the country. They were bringing in top talent. And I'll admit, I think that he thought the level of play in South Carolina wasn't the best, even though there was some quality. And when I was being recruited, my club coach, he wanted me to go to North Carolina. He also had some connections at Clemson, and it was always in the back of my mind. And I grew up obviously in a family full of faith, and my mom was like, just control what you can control, and God will make a way. And I was like, all right, Mom, here we go, whatever. Well, I go down to UAB to take my official visit. Coach Mike Getman was the coach there. I'd known him just through some times of playing on some so-called all-star teams. And I'm down at UAB. I'm about to leave. I have a meeting with him. He says, what do you think about your visit? I said, it was awesome. Well, everything was awesome to me because anywhere I went, South Carolina. And he pulls out this paper. He goes, if you sign this, your education is going to be paid for. He wasn't telling me to sign it there. He goes, you'll get a full scholarship.
Wow. That's cool.
And my parents couldn't afford for me to go.
Yeah.
To pay to go to school. And this is a message to all the parents. If your son or daughter is ever being recruited and you're not there within a meeting, make sure that they call you first before giving a verbal or signing. So my dad told me that. So I called my dad. I go, Dad, guess what? He goes, what, son? They offer me a full scholarship. You guys don't have to pay for anything. The next words out of his mouth were, son, that's awesome, but I know you want to go to Clemson. Come on home. And I hang up. I get back home, and a month later, I get a call from my club coach. He said there was a coaching change at Clemson. He sent the new coach, Trevor Adair, my VHS tape highlight reel. Trevor said, I like him, but we don't have any money. And he said, but he has a spot if he wants it. Now, yeah. So now you're probably thinking full ride UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Yeah.
Or books at Clemson, and I'd have to stay at home. My parents said it was up to me. I chose Clemson, and the first year I stayed at home and drove my mom's brown station wagon, the one with the seats in the back, the wood paneling. From, what is it, the Christmas Vacation?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
And that that was how I ended up at Clemson.
Wow. Well, first of all, that was really cool of your dad and of your parents, like with the full ride. That was really cool of them to be like, hey, actually remember this is what you actually want. Cause I would think as a parent, like that's a pretty attractive thing to not have to, pay for college. But at the same time, I guess I put myself in their shoes, and yeah, you probably would, if you knew your kid like had a real clear dream, like you'd probably want to do everything you could to try to put them in a position to achieve that.
And I also think they might not have told me, but they had done their research. So it wasn't this name it and claim it dream that sometimes I see today where individuals like, I want to play at this school. I want to work for this company.
Yeah.
Well, lack of a better statement, are you qualified?
Sure.
And I was as an athlete. And I think that's very important to, when you're setting these goals, to have them be challenging, but also realistic. And my parents had a sense of that. And they were parents that, this is going to sound crazy, but I wish they could have been at more of my games. I do. But by them not being there, it allowed the great coaches and families that I had to help mold me. They were not hovering. My mama always remember this. Before I would go to a practice or a game, she would say, have fun. When I come home, she would ask, did you have fun? I used to get pissed because I'm like, she doesn't care. She doesn't care.
Yeah.
But she knew the bigger picture, that if I could play the game for the right reason, those external rewards and those things that I have dreamed of would have a better chance of coming to fruition. And the last thing I'll say about Clemson is sometimes and I believe this in life, sometimes the company, the team, or the person that offers you the most money is actually not the place you should be. And that can be hard sometimes. I think you have to really do your due diligence. And that's like Clemson. I knew Clemson was a fit for me. Number one, because I needed to be close to home. I needed to have that safety net, because I knew nothing about college. Even though I lived 10 miles away, if I went on campus, it was to watch soccer.
Yeah.
And, that's how I ended up there. Yeah.
Wow. Now, part of me wonders if your parents not being at as many games as you wanted them to be, if that almost like forced you to grow up in a way, or forced you to be more comfortable in situations where you were kind of out on your own, right? Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, because they had laid a foundation. They gave me some good values and principles. That's also key to being successful, because they're going to be tested, and mine were tested definitely later in my years. But it did help me grow up. It did help me see people for who, because the way I grew up, quite frankly, within the religion I grew up in, if you looked a certain way, we judged you.
Mhm.
My parents weren't that way. That's why we left. And when I was out there on my own, I'm meeting all of these individuals from all walks of life, seeing things that I'd never seen before. It was a lot to take in. And I use this term, I had to learn how to survive. What do I mean by survive? I didn't want soccer and the experiences that came with it to be taken away. Now, learning how to survive can be good and bad. In a good way, I was learning some great things about life. I took the way that I learned how to play the game to survive in life. Meaning if I was with a family and we were going to a restaurant, I didn't go to a lot of restaurants growing up. Get out of the car. I'm walking with them. We get to the door. I'm listening to how they talk to everyone in there, the hostess. We sit down. I am watching how they set their fork, their knife, how they place their napkin. And the next thing in my mind is, okay, this young lady or young man, the waitress is going to come around and ask for my order. I need to make sure that I can articulate that in the right way. I didn't want them to think that I wasn't appreciative or deserving of this. And it did help me grow up. I did develop some habits, maybe that I had to break later. But yeah, I think to your point, my parents putting confidence in me and those great people who supported me was huge. It was very huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious, so going through all this as a kid, being in big time sports, playing D1 soccer, all that kind of stuff. I'm guessing you have a view on the whole kind of idea or argument around like how much importance to place on kids sports. And I asked this to you just because it is like, I'm living and breathing it right now. Like,
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you, when we spoke a couple weeks ago that I coach my son's baseball teams, and it is like, it's pretty intense for 11 years old. Like he plays on a travel team, he plays on a rec team. And if I'm honest with myself, I've had more moments than I'm proud of that I've gotten emotionally caught up in games myself, or that I'm like, criticizing him like on the ride home, stuff like that. And it's like, and then like a day later, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to do what your mom did and be like, did you have fun?
Yeah.
So I don't know, where do you come out on all that after having experienced it as an athlete?
Yeah. I think if sports done the right way can teach kids about life, can develop life skills. And if you look at the percentages of being a pro, they're so small.
Sure.
And I think when a kid is playing and they have that, like, I think it's important why the kid is playing. I think when the young person is playing, you'll know if they really want to pursue this. But the pressure that is put on them now from parents, from fans, can become overwhelming. Even at the professional clubs, when they get the young players in, they understand that even the training session that the coach implements for that day, it has to be fun. And I even look at this at the pro level for those elite soccer players, those elite young players that come in. Knowing the player is very important. Knowing, they are here because they're a pro for paying them, but why are they truly playing? And I think that's why you're seeing at the youth level, players get burnt out. And I know it's tough for parents to kind of be quiet, but especially nowadays, there's a lot of money being spent.
Mm.
But these kids are smart. They are very smart. And I think when they're allowed to be creative, to make mistakes, to lose, like that, losing and how the young players handle that nowadays is a big thing with me. A big thing. Even recently, I've been contacted by parents whose son or daughter did not get selected for the A team, and they're up in arms. They're pissed off. Granted, I understand they're spending money, but that's a time to teach a valuable learning lesson. What happens when you lose? Well, there's maybe something you need to learn. And once you figure that out, you go and you find a way to work at it. Not for the coach, not for the team, but for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And at the pro level, you lose. And as a coach, even when I'm looking at a young player, I want to know how they deal with adversity. How many teams have they bounced around to? And the next thing, and this is big also in college sports, even in pro, the parents. You better be a 5-star athlete if your parents are those that are going to potentially cause a bit of havoc. And coaches right away, they will not recruit, or in our case, sometimes, I say our case, my case, as if I'm working with a club, I'm very cautious about that player.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I know I was a little all over the place with that, but that.
No, I'm sitting here scribbling notes based on what you're saying because there's so much good stuff there. Yeah, it's incredible how many times the parents can like get in the way of kids, and like that can completely rub coaches the wrong way. And I totally hear what you're saying there. I mean, that for me, like one of the biggest takeaways I take from what you said there is, number one, the kid has to love it. And so that's probably first and foremost. Like, is this kid really passionate about it? Does this kid love it? And because it's going to be, I'm kind of, I don't know, adding my own context around what you say instead of just rephrasing what you're saying, but it's going to be a struggle for everyone, probably the whole family, if you're forcing this thing and the kid does not love it. So that's got to be like probably your starting point. And then beyond that, I just love what you said about losing, and the kid needs to be allowed to lose, as you say, and allowed to be creative. And so for me, that's a lesson I want to take away as a parent and as a coach, is like, especially at the age that I'm coaching right now. I mean, this is like 11-year-old kids. Like, who cares if you win or lose? And really, who cares, right?
Also, quite frankly, I know the way I coach is, I'll never forget this. I have a buddy here who runs a futsal facility, and the kids come from all different clubs. I start coaching and we have a game. I sit down on the bench. We practice all week. It's the kids. I'm sitting.
Yes.
A parent afterwards, maybe a couple, they go to my buddy who is the director. He says, why was he sitting down? Why was John sitting? He wasn't coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I was coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But what I knew about their kid that they didn't know was that if I got up and yelled and screamed, the kid would just freeze.
Yep.
Also, they had practice all that week. And what I noticed, me and my buddy who runs a facility, we had to break down this mindset of the kids that when they stepped on the court, if we said something, we were yelling at them.
Yeah.
It was sort of, when I sat down, when I first started doing it, even the players would look at me, like they would be on the court looking at me, like waiting for me to do something. And I said, play. And it would they're almost like a deer in headlights.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's got to be brought back until the kids understand that, okay, when I do get up and I am raising my voice, I'm not raising it because you are messing up. I'm raising it just like a player. I'm kind of your extra player. I'm raising it so you can hear me and maybe go left or go right. And the last thing I'll say about losing, there are many ways to win. You can win 10-0, but win the wrong way. Meaning, the first teams that I played on as a kid, we concentrated on the technical. being creative. The coach would allow us to do things in games that other teams wouldn't. And we got pummeled. We were getting pummeled. The coach says, don't worry. You guys are developing the tactical, the physical. In 2 years, we were just playing the ball around them, which then we're having more joy. And that's the way that I try to coach, because if all week we've been having fun working on different drills and they're not allowed to go try it during the game, how are they going to learn?
Yeah.
And at that age, that's the time when they should be allowed to make mistakes. And that's how I look at it. And it doesn't mean that I just sit down and say nothing, but, and it's tough for me sometimes too. I mean, literally, if you saw me, if parents saw me, I would have like a pen in my hand and I'm squeezing it because I want to get up sometimes.
Oh yeah. I understand. I very much understand. I've had many emotions coursing through my body in recent years coaching youth sports. But it's funny. We moved up. So my son's travel team, which I'm one of the coaches on that team, we moved up from like one travel league to like the next one. And, it was a whole thing. Like our team really worked toward it. And we're like, okay, we're going to go play these like higher level tournaments now. And we know we're going to probably get beat pretty good and all that, but we're going to be playing better competition and we're going to learn from it. And we have so far. That's kind of how it's played out. Like we've gotten beaten mostly, but we're seeing like, oh my gosh, these teams, like, wow, look at what they're doing. But what's so funny about what you say is one thing we as coaching staff recognized is in this league, the teams that are killing it, the coaches are basically silent. It's like they are a couple of coaches sitting on a bucket next to the dugout, and they're not flustered and saying, throw the ball in, do this, do that. They're sitting there and they'll do like a little like sign, like touch their ear and touch their nose. And then the whole team does something. We're like, oh my God, we got to get to this level where, so anyways, I love that concept. And yeah, I agree. I think, you got to keep it fun for them. You got to give them space to improve and to try stuff and to fail. And it's okay. It's okay to fail. And that's how you're going to learn.
I mean, we when I say we, the Charleston Battery, we got spanked 7-0 2 weeks ago against a very good San Antonio team. At the time we were in first place and we were still in first place. But what I realized is last weekend we bounced back. And we looked at, okay, why we lost.
Yeah.
And we won again. It's part of it, but I just wish more of the young athletes will understand that it's part of it. No, you don't go out there to lose, but it can be good for learning.
For sure. So, got slightly sidetracked there, but that's okay. So Clemson, you end up, clearly you must have done very well there. I know I mentioned earlier, I think you all won the ACC championship, which I'm sure was awesome. And I think you were the number 1 ranked team in the nation at some point.
Yeah.
That must have been super cool. So like, I guess Clemson, it worked out.
It worked out. And that senior year, we were number 1 in the country. And for some reason, the NCAA decided to pair. They made us the number 1 seed, and then the number 2 seed, which was Indiana, they put us in the same bracket, which is supposed to be the opposite. If we were going to meet, it should have been at the Final Four. But I enjoyed my time there at Clemson. I'm glad I went as well. My parents got to see me play. They were at every home game. And let's see, in 1996, Major League Soccer was formed. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about being a pro. I was just living the life as a college athlete and being able to have my own, dorm room and, go and eat all the food I want in the cafeteria. And Coach Trevor Dare comes over to me, I think my junior year, and says, I think you got a chance. I was like, a chance for what? He said, I think you got a chance to be a pro. So senior year, I was drafted. I think I was the 14th pick to, they're called Sporting KC now, but back then they were called the Kansas City Wizards. Yeah, a lot has changed since then.
Yeah.
And
you were the 14th pick in the whole draft
in the 1999.
Awesome.
Yeah. The draft is a bit different than the NFL. I tell this, I left school early I talk about it in the talk a little bit, for nothing, but I just thought that I got to go. And I went into camp. As a forward. I was never a pure finisher, and I was released. And I was like, okay, this sucks, because, you get drafted. You're like, oh yes, I'm the man. This is going to be it. Everything's going to take off. But at that time too, you got drafted by a USL team, which is the league Charleston Battery is in. And so they had my rights. I came to Charleston, and as seems like my whole career, fate, the good Lord would have it. In a scrimmage, the left back defender gets hurt. Coach is like, can you go back there and just fill in? I said, yeah. I did well. Yeah. That's when I became a defender. Changed. So
you played on the offensive side. Most of your career until then.
Yeah. And that is what I think saved my career, because when you're a forward at the top level, you got to be scoring goals.
Right.
And so I came to Charleston, and quite frankly, I was a little down about it, because I was like, hey, I was in the Major League Soccer, now I'm here, but I'm glad it happened. And came to Charleston, and my goal was, hey, I'm going to work at my craft to being the best player. But in the back of my mind, it was, I always want to get back to Major League Soccer. I always had these grand dreams. And the following year, I went back to Kansas City. This is crazy. I went back to Kansas City. You have to be drafted again. And I was drafted, I think, 7th this time. And we won the MLS Cup that year. And that's how I started out my pro career.
That's awesome. So tell me where it kind of went from there, because I know you had various iterations of, I don't fully understand how it all works with, players can get loaned and all this kind of stuff, but tell me some of that, because I know that wasn't your only time in the MLS, right?
The great thing about soccer is there's so many places to play. You can be on a team, but then someone, let's say you're not playing and you want to get games, you can be loaned out to another team, usually in another league, or it could be same league. And when I was in Kansas City, we won it that year, and we had a great squad. We played at Arrowhead Stadium, and I was like, all right, this is it. My career is going to take off. I get a call into the office one day at Arrowhead, and Coach Bob Gansler said, John, we're going to release you. And I could feel like my throat, just like I had an egg in my throat, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go again. But he gave me good advice, and I think I mentioned earlier about, when you know a young player or somebody, you can then advise them better. He said, you need games. I wasn't playing a lot of games.
Yeah.
Back then, the league is not what it is now, where they had reserve teams. I was traveling around with this, what they call Prop 40 team, which was with Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley, all these talented, I call them kids because they were like 16, 17. We literally would show.
Now they're like the broadcasters on the Olympics or World Cup, stuff like that.
Exactly. And we were playing in the USL League, and they would fly us in. So imagine we were playing against a team in Raleigh. We would all just fly in the Raleigh, have never practiced together, and then we'd play against this team. And so that's
crazy.
Right,
yeah.
That's
for a team sport.
Right. But that was their way at the time of trying to develop young players. Gansler gave me a choice. He said, you can try to come back, but you need games. and I went back to Charleston. Charleston became, it was like my home that I could go back to help develop as a player.
Yeah.
And
you could just go there and get reps, tons of reps.
Right. I would go back there. It's where I felt comfortable, and I just worked at my game. And then also I realized that the community embraced me. I didn't realize actually how good I had it then at the Battery. I could work at my craft. I was in my home state. I'm a professional soccer player. I ended up being able to go back to school and finish my degree. And it just shows again, the right environment can give you the opportunity to get to your dream.
Mm-hmm.
And my dream was to get back to MLS. And then we won the championship in 2003 in Charleston. My contract was up. And I was like, all right, this is the time. And I'm waiting to hear from teams from MLS. Nothing. I'm back home in Seneca. Talked to my mom. She's like, just be patient. And I get a call from Rochester Rhinos. And they were our rival. We had played them in the playoffs. We had beat them. They said, hey, we want to sign you. And the contract was really good. I'd never been there. Well, I've been to Rochester to play, but put it this way, it's totally different in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed. A week later, DC United calls for Major League Soccer. And
Wow.
they asked the coach, the assistant coach had seen me play in the USL. And he's like, have you signed? I said, yeah. The lesson there was for me, patience. If you think about what we talked about earlier with Clemson, but as I got older, it was about, I kind of lost that patience, and it was about seeking the external things of the money. DC United won the championship that year, 2015. I ended up getting to DC the following year. And I always think about that story, and it just reminds me now more about patience.
Yes.
And, but I ended up getting back there, and it was a blast. I enjoyed it. Played on some great teams, and, got injured, was out for a year, I'd moved
wow.
home to, I don't know if you knew that. Yeah. I was out for a season. Man, that was a low point.
Mhm.
I have to admit. And
Did you think you were done at that point?
oh yeah, I thought I was done.
Yeah.
I thought I was done. I'd never had a major injury.
Yeah. What was the injury?
It was my patella tendon. Imagine just overuse and having tendonitis. And, the doc looked at it and said, look, it's good that we looked at it because it was probably about to rupture. And I just wasn't recovering fast enough, and I got released. And obviously when you get released, you're not healthy. There's no team that's going to sign you. And, living in DC, I had to make a decision. My college teammate was in South Carolina, and I was in a bad place because I had DC United soccer had to find me for so long. Now I felt like a failure.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting how it's sort of, your identity sort of gets wrapped up in these jobs? I mean, I'm obviously not a professional athlete, but I've been in a similar experience before where I worked in a job in finance for 12 years and then left it, and then had a year before my next job started. And that year was so hard because I just never realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in that job. What do you do? This is what I do. This is where I work. This,
Yeah.
So did you feel some of that like identity crisis?
Totally.
There?
I felt like a failure. You grow up in a small town and people, he's made it. What they didn't know at the time was, in those years of Major League Soccer, that there wasn't the money in it like it is now. But I felt like I had let, my family down, my friends and my community. And I was doing therapy in DC, rehabbing. Once they released me, I knew I needed to move, to save money. I get a call from my college teammate that we came in as freshmen together. And he's like, "Hey, why don't you move down, stay with me in Greenville? And there's a clinic called the Stedman Hawkins Clinic," which was a great clinic that had really worked with some elite level athletes to get them back. And I was like, I don't know. So I said, yeah, I moved down. I moved in with him and started going to Stedman Hawkins. I think it was called the Mary Black Hospital. I dropped.
South Carolina is always the answer, it seems. Coming back to South Carolina.
Hey, yeah. And so I'm in there at least at minimum 4 times a week, sometimes 5. I'd be in there 3 to 4 hours. But when I was in there rehabbing, I wasn't rehabbing to play again.
Yeah.
Okay. In my mind, I needed to play again.
Oh.
And, I'm trying to figure out, what I'm going to do. It's a tough thing. And I think as you mentioned earlier about identity to certain careers or certain things can be a little bit dangerous because if it can be taken away.
Yeah.
And that taught me something about identity. Like, what do you connect your identity to? And I was talking with the editor today about that's why I believe your external motivation, your purpose has to be bigger than, I'll use just playing soccer.
Yes.
Because it can be taken away. And it was, but once again, it was a chance to learn. I was a hard learner because it took me a year, and I get a call from the Charleston Battery and they said, "Hey, I hear you're playing again." I said, "Nope, I'm not playing." You know what I was doing? I was coaching kids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But the coach who we'd known each other since I was a rookie. And now I'm telling this story, I have a feeling he knew that I was kind of in a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
I come down to Charleston, we meet for lunch. He says, "Look, just come to a preseason." I said no. And then I finally said, "Yeah, I'm at preseason." I'm running around the field and one of my good friends, Ian Fuller, who coaches at Minnesota FC, he looks over at me and he goes, "Man, you're limping really bad. Are you going to be able to play?" Like, you're supposed to be my friend.
That's not the positive reinforcement I was looking for here.
No, but that's Ian, who's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
Well, 3 weeks later, I was playing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was Coach saw something. He knew something about me that I didn't. I think sometimes when you face adversity, you can get so low where you can't even look back and see and reflect on those things that you've already done, and also reflect to see that there's a good chance you've probably been here before. Now, yes, this was an injury, but in a way I'd been released. I'd been hurt, nothing to this magnitude. And it was like, there was always opportunity for me to come back. And when I came,
right, like when you're in the middle of it, it feels like it's
the world's
like you
coming to an end.
It's a dark place, right? You can't see the way out of it. And then sometimes it takes somebody from the outside looking in at you and being like, and seeing it within you rather than you seeing it within yourself.
Right. And I think that's why it's very important, if you can, to have what I call agents of change, people around you that can remind you of that. And those individuals can be so powerful and help you to remember, like, even if I never played again, I was still successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if I never played again.
Yeah.
Also, what I realized is that I had I had learned all of these valuable skills that were transferable into, if you want to call it the real world, the business world. But in my mind, it was soccer or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and my parents had warned me about that. They they sensed it. I think probably when I was in college, when I wasn't coming home as much, or it was just all about soccer. I would go play anywhere in the world. But I'm thankful I had those agents of change around me, and I feel for those who do not have them. But I think that's why with what you're doing, the intentional wisdom can show individuals, like, you may be in a bad place, but you can still come out of it. You also can reflect on, I believe everybody has success in their life in some way.
Yeah.
But sometimes what I'll use myself, what we do is we think success is only this person won trophies. They made this amount of money. Like my mom was success to me. She never went to college.
Yeah.
But she was this amazing, just mother, wife.
Yeah.
The success.
Yeah. It sounds like it, based on just even the pieces of advice and that she and your dad sort of bestowed upon you at sort of some critical times in your life. Like, that's success right there. Like, being able to guide you and, you know, to being able to guide you at that time. So anyhow, so I guess, you bounce back from the injury,
Right.
you end up with Charleston. So you go on to play, I think, for years after that, right?
And I played for another 7 years. My last year was in 2014, and it gave me, I honestly played like I was a kid again. Cause I had more appreciation. I lost a step, but in turn, this got stronger.
Right.
And out of, once again, something that looked like a failure or a loss, if you want to call it, another strength was created.
Do you think it's because you sort of accepted where you were and you were like, I'm good being a Charleston Battery player, and did that allow you to sort of like have a little bit more fun out there?
Yes, because quite frankly, not everybody can be a professional soccer player at, say, Manchester United, Sporting Kansas City, even at the Charleston Battery. It's the same in businesses. Not everybody can be the CEO. But when I looked at my life and I looked back and said, I'm a professional soccer player. I'm living in a great city. I'm getting to do something and to be paid for it. Like, I should be thankful. And that's how I started to look at it. And when I started to look at it that way, it just seemed like the world opened up to me from a standpoint of why I was playing, how I interacted with the community. If I was in DC, it's a massive city. I wasn't put it this way, I'd be just a fly on the wall. But in this city, soccer was so huge, and had people from the university that used to watch me play in my community.
Yeah.
There were all these positive things that I had here. So it was a change in mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
think,
cool.
I think thoughts are powerful. I think your individual's thoughts are just as powerful as someone taking an action. They're so powerful, and that's why I'll write in my, like, on my phone in my notes. I try to, I guess you want to call them remembrance stones of where, okay, I put a date. You know, I remember when this happened, and I keep track of those, and I can go back in and look at them just to remind myself of, hey, you know what? You should be thankful.
Yeah. I like that. That's a great idea. It reminds me of, I had this author and performance coach named Todd Herman on my podcast a while back. He wrote a book called The Alter Ego Effect. And one of the things that he told me about was, well, we were talking about this concept of how just it's human nature to focus on the negatives and like what's going wrong and like to forget the positives. And he told me that he does something like every time he has a win, right, in some part of his life, he writes it on a poker chip and he puts it in a jar and he has it sitting on his desk. And he's like, every time I'm kind of feeling down, I just look over that jar and I'm like, how could a loser have all these poker chips in this jar right now? Right. It's just like this. Yeah. It's just like this physical reminder that, hey, there's a lot of good stuff that's happened here.
Yeah. There's good stuff all around us, I think, is how do you manage that, but still be motivated to challenge yourself, to still dream big and do something big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, even as we talk about it, it helps inspire me. Like even you bringing up these memories, because life is, life moves at a fast pace now where we forget, like, I've done some good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. You gotta remind yourself once in a while.
Yeah.
So your playing career comes to an end in 2014 and you finished as a real, I think you're a record holder in different categories for Charleston Battery, and you're kind of a local institution. Like as you mentioned, you had a lot of you had a lot of support from that community, and Charleston's a special place. And so your involvement with soccer is not finished there. Like tell me about that. Tell me about what the post-playing career has kind of looked like for you and kind of what you're doing now and where you're kind of going to go from here.
Yeah. So when I was done playing, going back to identity, I wanted to do something different. And I decided I interviewed for the startup company that had just moved to Charleston. They were they had some technology that was creating a nutrition supplement. I'd never done sales, but I sent the founder and the CEO my TED Talk.
Oh yeah. I'm going to link to that for listeners. John's got an awesome TED Talk from, what was it, like 8 years ago or something like that. I found it on YouTube. And, it's cool. So I'm going to link to that. In the
Thank you.
notes.
And he looked at it and he's like, let's talk. And the crazier, I left a few pieces out.
Yeah.
Major League Soccer, they do some great things for their players. Everything from helping them with resume to connecting them with they call them headhunters. Yeah. And, help find jobs. And they connected me with one, and I passed along this job opportunity. And she calls the number and she calls me back and says, yeah, I don't know about this because nobody picked up. So I'm like, oh man, well, this sucks. I'm driving to Atlanta. I pull over to a gas station, get gas, and something tells me to call the number. I call the number, the founder picks up. That's when we had the conversation. I sent him 2 weeks later, I was in his office, and I took the job and traveled around the country selling this product. I had no sales experience. And I started out horribly, but then I realized what I was good at was this conversation and connecting with people.
Yeah.
And I decided to do it the way that was comfortable to me. I'll never forget, I think I went to Oregon State, had a meeting with their strength and conditioning coach. Those are usually the individuals that we usually pinpointed that can make a decision. I fly back, we spent company dollars to take me out there. He goes, so how much are they going to buy? I don't know. Like we just talked about the product a little bit. And I left some there.
Yeah.
And I looked at me. But later he realized what I was doing was building the relationships. And I was good at that. And after that, I left I left the company and I went back into coaching. But during that time, that's when I did the TED Talk. And to be honest with everybody and you, I had no idea what TED Talks were. No idea.
They're pretty prestigious. So that's pretty cool. It's a thing to get asked to do.
Yeah. The funny thing is that a friend of mine had reached out to me. I said, there's no way I'm doing that. I don't even know what TED is, who TED is. I'm not doing this. And she convinced me, but you can probably tell at the end that I was nervous. I mean, I never done anything like that. But the reason I think I was able to do it without passing out or throwing up on stage was my motives for it.
Mm.
I didn't know what TED Talks were. I didn't know that it could launch a speaking career.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that individuals already had books. It was just, I'm up here sharing a story, a piece of me to help.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that she convinced me to do it.
Well, you know what? There's some parallels there with what we were talking about earlier with playing a sport for the sake of playing, right? Because you love it and it's something you want to do as opposed to all of these other downstream motivations.
Yeah. And so from there, I went back into coaching. I was back in coaching with the Battery. At that time also, right before that, I started my own company, Yes with John Wilson, where I would travel around and speak. And even recently for Major League Soccer, which is something I enjoy, I will go into different clubs and facilitate their character development program. We talk about values. We also talk about not only being a quality player on the field, but also off the field.
Yeah.
I think I enjoy that the most.
That sounds great.
We also go in and we speak to all the rookies who get drafted. We have individuals there who speak about financial literacy. Mostly for me, my role there is to talk to them about what it's like to be a pro. And we talk about values because it's, you get drafted, that's exciting, but that's just the beginning. And with the growth of the game, we want to be able to prepare these players as best we can for them to be a success in the community, at home, and also on the field. And so I've really enjoyed that. And the guys have been great. It's a different type of athlete now. When I was drafted, I was 20, 21. Now players are 16.
Wow.
17.
Yeah.
And then you throw in social media.
Mm-hmm.
You throw in the growth of the game. You throw in the pressure, and it can be a lot. And that's where I hope that I can help. I can be that mentor, that coach, that person that they can trust. And I take that type of approach also to my job here with the Battery. I was assistant coach. I was director of community engagement, and now I'm the club ambassador. But I see myself still as a coach. When I say coach, it's not just on the field, but off the field with the players in the community.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I can see you being excellent at that kind of mentor coach role for some of these young players, just given all your experience. And I think a lot of your perspective, and it's like you've learned a lot of these lessons yourself over the years. And I think you're really good at, verbalizing that. And so I think MLS and Battery are very lucky to have you involved because I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom that you can pass along to those players.
Thank you.
And there's a tremendous amount of wisdom you've already passed along today to our listeners. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I hope, and I try to, and I'm going to mention that I'm working on this book. And
yeah, tell me about that.
The book is titled Start with Yes. And
Start with Yes.
Yeah. And the reason why is because when the coach asked me to play that day, that the first day I was out there at practice with Andy, I said yes. That was the first step to a lot of what you see now or what you're hearing now. And I like to think of YES as standing for your everyday steps. And it's a book that's not the end all be all of how to experience joy, creativity, curiosity, and optimism, to have the life you want to live. But it's that book to get you started. I believe it's not as complicated as sometimes we make it. I talk a lot about this childlike approach. That's where the educate, motivate, train comes from. I had a buddy of mine ask me, how did you actually know? It was during the TED Talk. I was speaking with someone who's helping me on the talk, and I love this guy. He treated me like a coach, like the coach that told you, like, he was just straightforward. He goes, I'm not feeling your idea. I'm not feeling your talk. I'm like, what? I'm doing the best I can. And he goes, what was your reflection point? I was like, what do you mean? Like, he goes, why did you play? Or what? I go, when I got hurt in DC and we're both going back and forth. And he goes, well, how did you like find this joy and then maximize it? And that's when I kind of was like, I just educated myself about the game. I stayed motivated and I trained. Yeah. I didn't realize that I had developed that as a kid, and it carried that all the way in my adult life. That was the foundation. And then I took the pieces and put them in there, and I just repeated over and over. Like when he asked me, I was trying to think of some elaborate plan or execution strategy. No, it was educate, motivate, train, and repeat it. And in the book, I talk about that. Also in the book, I talk about, most people know me as John, the soccer player. But before that, there was this other part that, quite frankly, I didn't talk about because I was embarrassed, because I grew up in this religious kind of almost like cult where we looked at people a certain way, where sports weren't of God. And I talk about that to show that I did learn a lot from that. My faith is strong, but I talk about it as well to show that from an environment, you still can come out and do some great things. And quite frankly, too, the book is also more for me to get out some things that I've always wanted to talk about.
I can't wait to read it. What are we? Do we have any expected date on that yet, or is it too early to tell?
It's going to be in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And I'm a writer, but I'm not a writer.
Meaning
I know my gifts, and I have a great co-writer,
awesome,
co-editor, but my talent is more of this, so it's taking a little longer than expected, but
cool. Well, I can't wait. And let me know when that's out, because I want to let my listeners know and let my newsletter readers know. I think everyone who's listened to this conversation is probably going to want to check it out. So, well, John, I know I've probably taken too much of your time today, so this has been a real pleasure. I've gotten so much out of this conversation. If people want to follow along with your journey, where's the best place? Is that Instagram, or where should people follow you?
Instagram is the best, and I need to make sure I get my handle right. It's John A. Wilson, John, the letter A, it's my middle name, Anthony Wilson, Wilson, and the number 25.
Okay,
that
cool.
was the number I wore for years, but
nice. Okay, I'm going to link to that in the show notes. So if you're listening to this episode right now, you should be able to just go in and click on that. And I'll link to the TED Talk that you mentioned. And then once the book is out, we will spread the word. But John, this is awesome, man. You're doing great work. Your story is super inspiring, and I appreciate your time. So thanks for joining me.
Greg, I thank you. And I think everything you're doing with Intentional Wisdom. I know I mentioned the other day that I had the opportunity to check it out. I love the simplicity of it, but I love the information that you're giving. I think the first thing I noticed is that it's a site that I think really piqued my interest, because I had some thoughts about, hey, how are people successful? And sometimes it can get confusing. But then when you start looking at the information you're posting, you're seeing there's a lot of synergy. And so it's awesome with what you're doing, and
thank you.
And all continued success.
Thank you. Well, I hope I can keep getting awesome guests like you on the podcast to learn from. So this is awesome, man. Thank you. And I may look you up if I'm down in Charleston. I might have to come see a Battery game.
Yeah, so. Come to a Battery game. We're in first place, and love to have you.
Awesome. All right, good stuff. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Intentional Wisdom. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. John was just awesome, and I really appreciate a chance to get to know him. And I want to give a special shout out to my friend Sean Joyce and thank him for setting up this conversation. This is the second podcast guest that Sean Joyce has sourced for me. So he is on the lookout for awesome people who've got great stories. Apparently, Sean sat down at an airport next to John Wilson, got to talking, and the next thing you know, he's on the Intentional Wisdom podcast. I love it. Sean, thank you. This one is for you. I appreciate you and your support of this podcast. So thank you so much. Lastly, if you haven't yet subscribed, remember to sign up for the Intentional Wisdom newsletter. It is one email every other week. I recap the best of what I'm learning from awesome guests just like John Wilson and many others. And I also chronicle the experiments I'm doing on myself. So the 30-day push-up challenges, all the different fitness routines, habit stuff I'm working on. I tell you all about that. I tell you what's working, what's not working, and really try to share helpful information. I also share my content diet with you. So it's all the books I'm reading, all the articles I'm reading, all the podcasts I'm listening to, all the videos I'm watching, all the best stuff. I narrow it down to 2 or 3 things to share with you every other week. So check that out, gregcampion.substack.com. Would love to have you join that community. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next time.